Hey guys, tonight we step into a story that doesn't wait for you to be ready. It's dawn in a little thatched roof cottage, and the fire's gone cold. The straw mattress beneath you crackles faintly as you shift your feet down to the icy clay floor. The hens outside are already gossiping louder than the neighbors, and your youngest siblings loudly failing to whisper. The morning air smells like wet wool, burned onions, and something vaguely fungal. Your wedding day has arrived, and it's not the fairy tale kind. It's the hope the pigs didn't escape again kind. There's no mirror, no spa treatment, no filtered selfie moment. Your mother hands you a pail and points to the creek. Washing up before your vows? It's be will bring your own basin. You trudge barefoot through mud and low hanging mist, gathering water, dodging sheep droppings, and already questioning the life decisions made on your behalf. If you're listening to this in bed, maybe keep one eye open. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where my night owls are tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The cottage you return to is humming with people. Your aunt is plucking feathers from a chicken in the hearth corner, and your older cousin is already judging your bed hair. Today's the day your family officially trades you off like surplus grain, but with more ribbon and definitely less personal agency. Your wedding dress is more linen sack than gown. It's been mended 15 times and smells faintly of mint and mildew. Still, it's a family heirloom of sorts, and your mother insists it was once worn by a woman who had 12 healthy children and a very obedient goat. Outside, the church bell tolls lazily, as if even it isn't sure anyone's really in a rush. And they aren't. Medieval wedding ceremonies can stretch all day, depending on how much ale the priest's had and how many Latin words he remembers. You catch your reflection in a puddle just long enough to realize this might be the cleanest you'll be all month. It's the little things. You hear the clanging of pots and the shout of someone trying to herd pigs out of the ceremonial yard. Your uncle is already drunk. Someone's misplaced the bread knife. And in the background, your groom is being forcibly bathed by his brothers, one of whom is trying to scrape what looks like soot off his back with a spoon. Historians still argue whether most peasants truly understood the religious symbolism of their wedding vows or whether they were just eager to finally share a mattress legally. One thing's for sure, you're not marrying for love. You're marrying for security, land, goats, or occasionally, because your father's made a bet involving turnips and mead. As you step outside, the mud squelches between your toes. Children are throwing what might be flowers or just colorful weeds at your feet. You're handed a scrap of dried lavender to hold not for aesthetics, but to mask the smell of, well, everyone. And then it happens. Your cousin giggles and hands you the bridal shoes. They're just someone's patched up leather things, but they've been rubbed with rosemary and goat fat. Allegedly for luck, possibly for grip. Your journey to the chapel is short but symbolic. Along the way, you pass the house of the local wise woman who spits twice to ward off bad luck, and an ox cart full of potatoes that nearly runs over your flower girl. Your veil keeps slipping into your mouth. You resist the urge to scream. At the church, the priest greets you by calling you by your sister's name. You correct him. He shrugs. Close enough. And so, with chattering teeth, freezing fingers, and a gut full of uncertainty, and possibly raw onion, you step forward. Not into romance, but into a social contract sealed by beer, land agreements, and the vague hope that your husband doesn't snore too much. Oh, and the bells? You'll learn about those in just a minute. But let's just say they're not for celebration. The dressing ritual is oddly public. You stand behind a modest hanging cloth, but modesty is relative when half the village is sharing one living space, and your younger brother keeps poking his head around the corner to ask if he can eat the raisins meant for the wedding bread. You're laced into a bodice that's seen better centuries. The fabric is stiff with age and mystery stains, possibly ink, possibly stew. Your mother mutters a prayer as she reaches for the herb bundle, a crinkled pouch of thyme, rue, and sage, all tied up with a scrap of blue cloth. This, she insists, is your protection. Protection from what? You ask. She doesn't say. Just tucks it under your armpit with the same grim determination she uses when salting pork. These bitter herbs are your version of deodorant, perfume, and supernatural pest control all in one. Rue, after all, is for warding off illness. Sage to purify. Thyme for courage. No one mentions that most of these plants also repel fleas, lice, and unwanted spirits. But you're getting the message. Marriage is going to smell like a medieval spice rack. You're told not to sneeze. Apparently that would let the bad winds in. You do sneeze, of course. 3 times. Your aunt promptly spits into the fire and mutters something that rhymes with goat's hoof. Historians still argue whether this ritual was strictly symbolic or genuinely believed to have spiritual consequences. What's clear is that brides in your position were expected to arrive at the altar not only clean-ish, but infused with the correct scent profile to confuse demons, charm your groom, and reassure the church elder sitting suspiciously close. You glance at the herb pouch sticking out slightly from your neckline and wonder what it says about you as a person. Does a sprig of mugwort mean you're adventurous? What if the marjoram is wilted? Don't worry, says your cousin, who has just tied a ribbon around your wrist using her teeth. Mine had stinging nettle. I still got pregnant in a week. You nod politely. It feels too early to unpack that. Your grandmother appears next, wielding a pot of something thick and waxy. It's part beeswax, part honey, part something that smells like regret. She rubs it on your hands, declaring it will keep your skin young and faithful. You don't ask for clarification. You're handed a wooden comb and instructed to run it through your hair-ons, east to west, once north to south. It's directional, apparently. You comply, stabbing yourself in the ear in the process. Outside, the preparations are getting louder. A fiddler has started warming up, producing sounds somewhere between a cat fight and a chicken opera. Someone is yelling about turnips again. A goat wanders into the doorway, eyes full of judgment. The herbs beneath your bodice begin to itch. Your sister enters holding your bridle. Sasha-faded crimson belt embroidered with what might be lions, or possibly angry ducks. She ties it tightly around your waist, then adds a tiny bell. Just one. Tradition, she explains, as if that clears anything up. You raise an eyebrow. Why the bell? So they know you're coming, she shrugs. Good brides don't sneak. That's comforting. In truth, bells on bridal garments served a mix of superstitions and practicalities. Some believed the jingling would scare off evil spirits. Others thought it ensured the bride didn't try to flee the ceremony chastity in surround sound. A fringe theory? The bells acted as low-tech chastity alarms for the wedding night. If there was too much jingling, something scandalous was afoot, or bed. You reach down and try to mute it. No luck. It jingles with every breath. And you're breathing heavily. You whisper to your cousin, "What if I trip?" She grins. Then your in-laws will think you're fertile. Your aunt calls out that it's time. You rise, jingling faintly, with herb bundles taped to your chest, and a belt that tinkles like a haunted toy shop. Outside, your groom is being helped into a tunic 2 sizes too large, and someone is trying to pin a chicken feather to his cap. You suddenly wish you had more time, both the herb and the general concept. You walk into the chilly morning light, and the bell on your sash jingles with every step. It's not a joyful sound more, like the world's most passive-aggressive wind chime. As you step onto the muddy path toward the village green, the church in the distance looms like a damp, grumpy guardian of tradition. The veil is next. Your mother produces it with the flair of someone revealing a sacred relic, though it looks more like an old curtain someone embroidered with what might be a dragon or a toothy eel. It smells of lavender and attic. She places it gently over your head, then adjusts it so that you can almost see. You blink. Everything goes beige. Veils in medieval Europe weren't just for modesty or mystery. Their main purpose was supernatural camouflage. A bride on her wedding day was considered between worlds, little too close to death and birth at the same time. Spirits might notice. The veil was meant to confuse them. Historians still argue whether this belief came from pagan rituals, Christian symbolism, or just a general fear of things with no faces. Either way, you're now wandering toward your marriage half blind and thoroughly cloaked in linen superstition. Your uncle claps you on the back and tells you it's good luck if a sheep sneezes during your procession. You glance around nervously, praying none of the livestock are suffering allergies today. One goat stares straight at you. You stare back. There's tension. Your groom appears near the well, picking a twig out of his hair. He has shaved badly. There's a line down his chin that looks like a bird tried to nest there and changed its mind. He smiles. You nod. He nods. A leaf falls between you. The wedding procession starts. You're flanked by cousins, half of whom are holding pies or handkerchiefs, for no clear reason. A small girl throws what might be flower petals or just colorful straw in your path. Someone starts singing a ballad about cabbage. The veil slips again. You adjust it and get a brief glimpse of your future mother-in-law. She's mouthing something. You're not sure if it's a blessing or a warning. Possibly both. Your bell jingles again. This time the children nearby clap. One begins imitating your walk. Another tries to tie a sprig of parsley to your shoe. You smile because you're supposed to, not because you feel like it. The chapel door is decorated with garlands of ivy and old cloth, and above it hangs a bundle of garlic knot for vampires, but again, for spirits. The line gets blurry in medieval Europe. If it smelled weird, it probably had magical properties. You duck your head to enter, and your veil snags on the doorframe. You are now momentarily married to the building itself. A cousin helps unhook you. You are free to proceed. Inside, it smells of beeswax and damp stone. The priest is already halfway through a muttered Latin prayer that might just be the shopping list for tomorrow's feast. You and your groom stand awkwardly, side by side, not touching. Your veil makes you feel like you're dreaming or trapped in a potato sack with spiritual significance. The priest gestures for the rings, and you realize there aren't any. Instead, your groom offers you a length of woven red thread. You tie it around each other's wrists. This is the old way. Rings are for nobles. Threads are for everyone else. Your bell jingles softly. The priest raises one eyebrow. Then the vows. Yours are short. His are shorter. You each say something approximating consent, in Latin, sort of. And then, just like that, you are married. Someone outside begins banging pots and pans together in celebration, scaring 3 chickens and waking a dog. The priest tries to finish his blessing over the noise. You nod politely and fight the urge to sneeze again. Rue is a strong smell. As you exit, your mother throws grains at your face hard. Supposedly, it ensures fertility. Realistically, it just goes in your eye. You smile again, now legally obligated to do so. You don't get much of a break between your ceremony and the feast. In fact, you are gently nudged okay, shoved into the direction of the long communal table by 3 separate aunts and a mysterious neighbor who keeps calling you sweet cabbage. You still can't see properly through the veil, but at this point, you figure it's safer that way. The feast is held outdoors under a canvas tarp, strung between a barn and a sagging apple tree. Everything smells like meat, smoke, and someone's overpowering homemade ale. Your seat is a wooden stool with a splinter you'll be noticing well into the honeymoon phase. Before you can sit, though, your new husband offers you the wedding goblet, shared cup of something that tastes like fermented sadness and rosemary. You gag slightly. Everyone cheers. It's tradition. The meal begins. First comes the stew. No one really knows what's in it, but there are definitely onions, maybe duck, and possibly something that once had feet. Bread follows, dense, flat, and made with barley, rye, and the occasional pebble. That's not a culinary critique. Medieval milling wasn't what you'd call precision engineering. Then the main dish, roasted boar snouts, arranged artfully around a pudding of something suspiciously gray. You smile again. You're doing so much smiling today. It's starting to cramp. Someone plops a jelly on your plate. It quivers ominously. You poke it. It pokes back. It's made from hooves, apples, and optimism. A gelatinous reminder that medieval cuisine believes strongly in texture and mildly in flavor. You lean over to your husband and whisper, "Is this dessert?" He shrugs. "It might be breakfast." A man with a harp begins playing a tune. It's somewhere between Celebratory March and Dying Goose. People start tapping their feet anyway. It's not about the melody, it's about the mood. Someone hands you a honey cake the size of a fist and whispers, "Don't eat all of it. You'll need some for the fertility charm." You blink. You try not to ask questions anymore. Across the table, your cousin is feeding her husband from her fingers, but only after dipping each bite in a dish of what might be mustard or possibly soap. Everyone seems delighted. You attempt the same with your groom, who immediately sneezes and spills ale down his tunic. A moment later, your grandmother bangs her spoon on the table and demands silence. She rises, clears her throat dramatically, and announces she will now perform the traditional toast/warning. It includes references to goats, the moon, and how your aunt's marriage began with a bread fight and ended in 4 children and 2 lawsuits. Historians still argue whether these feasting rituals were truly communal or merely tolerated chaos. What's undeniable is that these moments shared meals, slurred songs, and oddly suggestive meat platters did more to bond families than any church vow ever could. Suddenly, the filler begins again, this time faster. Guests clap, shout, and start dragging each other into something that vaguely resembles dancing. You are not exempt. Your veil flaps dangerously as you are spun by 3 different people, 2 of whom might be relatives and one who is definitely just here for the food. Your bell jingles madly the entire time, sounding less like a bride and more like a confused cat with rhythm. You laugh, it slips out, it's genuine. This at least feels real. The food, the noise, the smell of earth and roast pork and overexcited doggets, messy and ridiculous and unmistakably alive. Then your mother-in-law appears with a fresh plate of something steaming and beige. "Eat up," she says. "It helps with conception." You don't ask what it is. You just eat it. It tastes like garlic and destiny. Later that evening, as the sun slips behind the trees and the revelers grow louder, you're pulled aside for what your cousin calls the secret exchange. It sounds ominous, but it's apparently quite sweet. Or at least, sweet adjacent. You are handed a small, lumpy bundle wrapped in embroidered cloth. Inside is your marriage token. For noble brides, this might be a hand-painted miniature, or a ring engraved with a poetic verse. For you, it's a ribbon with a bit of your own hair sewn into the stitching, along with a single dried flower and, unexpectedly, a cat whisker. "That's from Mitzi," your cousin says proudly, as if this feline contribution ensures good crops and mutual understanding. You take the token and pass it to your husband. He fumbles in his pouch and returns the favor, pressing something small and hard into your hand. It's a button, possibly from your own dress, possibly from someone else's. It's the thought that counts. These tokens are your own form of vowing more personal than the muttered Latin or the braided thread at the altar. You each carry a piece of each other, or at least a piece of each other's laundry. Historians still argue whether these symbolic exchanges had magical roots or were just early versions of couples' keepsakes. What's clear is that they carried weight, especially in communities where possessions were few and meaning had to be embroidered into everyday objects. You're also warned not to drop your token in a privy. Apparently that could reverse the marriage, or summon frogs. Depends on who you ask. The evening grows dimmer and someone starts a song about the moon and lost cows. You are seated now on a bench with your groom, close but still slightly stiff like 2 apprentices learning to sit next to each other. A guest approaches and offers you both a bowl of something that smells vaguely of cinnamon and vinegar. "Love broth," they say with a grin. Old recipe. Might also unclog your ears. You sit politely. It's mostly beetroot and mystery. Around you, torches are being lit. Not candle torches. Fire safety is more of a suggestion in your village. Shadows stretch and dance across the walls of the barn where the final course is being served. A hard, flat pie containing at least 4 root vegetables, 1 whole egg, shell included, and a mystery meat you suspect had feathers. A toast is made. Your names are called, one of them pronounced hilariously wrong, and the guests clap, bang utensils, and whistle. It's chaotic and oddly tender. You begin to understand why weddings are remembered for decades, not because they're elegant, but because they're absolutely impossible to forget. Then someone stands and begins the conjugal blessing song. Yes, it's real. Yes, it's sung by 3 old men who look like they were carved from oak. Yes, it includes the phrase, "May your loins be loud with laughter." You bite your lip to stop from laughing. You fail. The sun has nearly vanished now, and the stars have started blinking into view. The fiddler has passed out. The cake is mostly gone. Your bell jingles as you stand up once again, this time to begin the short, slow walk to the bridal bed. Your aunt tosses you an herb sachet and winks. For your pillow, keeps the dreams tame. You're not sure what qualifies as a tame dream, but you take it anyway. The path ahead is lit by sputtering lanterns, soft moss beneath your feet, and the smell of smoke, cloves, and roasted parsnip. You glance at your husband. He offers you his elbow like he's seen nobles do. You take it. The ribbon around your wrist sways gently in the evening air. For now, you're ready. There's no sweeping staircase, no silk sheets, no petals scattered romantically across a 4-poster bed. Your bridal chamber is, technically speaking, the same space your uncle uses to store turnips in winter. But tonight, it's yours, or at least, it's draped in enough cloth and bundled herbs to make you forget that a goat once gave birth here. You duck beneath a low beam, your bell jingling faintly in the hush. The smell inside is a mix of dried rosemary, damp wood, and beeswax. A small oil lamp flickers beside the beta low, narrow thing covered in patchwork quilts, one of which you strongly suspect used to be a cloak. Your husband enters behind you, tripping slightly over the threshold. He catches himself on a stool and mutters something about the floor being ambitiously uneven. You nod. It's not his best line, but given the day, you'll allow it. Now comes the part no one talks about. Not in detail, at least. You are expected to prove the union has been formalized, or at the very least, that you both tried. To facilitate this, an elder, usually a priest, a midwife, or someone's terrifying grandmother, might be asked to observe the start of the wedding night. Or worse, to wait outside and check the sheets in the morning. In your case, it's your great-aunt Mildred, who has set up a chair just outside the door, humming softly and knitting something aggressively. Historians still argue whether this practice was about religious sanctity, property law, or just really nosy relatives. What we know for sure is that nothing ruins the mood quite like the sound of enthusiastic knitting in the hallway. You sit on the edge of the bed, pulling off your shoes. One has a beetle in it. You thank it for its service and send it on its way. Your husband is doing the same, carefully setting his herbal garter on the stool as if it might explode. You exchange a glance. This is it. The big moment. A joining of souls, a merging of households, a cultural expectation so large it has its own sausage dish. And yet, you both just start giggling. It's the tension, the absurdity, the fact that someone's hung a dried eel on the wall for good luck, and neither of you can stop staring at it. You lie back on the mattress. It creaks like a tree giving up on life. He joins you carefully. The bed creaks louder. Outside, Great-Aunt Mildred clears her throat. A warning, a cheer, no one knows. Your bell jingles again lightly. You both freeze. It's hard to be romantic when your hip is poking into a knot in the wood, and the blanket smells faintly of elderberry wine and regret. Still, there's a moment where your hands meet, and something quiet and genuine slips in. Not fireworks, not passion, but a sort of camaraderie. 2 people, equally unsure, equally itchy from dried herbs sewn into their sleeves, equally trapped by custom, and yet, somehow, making it through. The lamp flickers. You shift beneath the quilt. Your wedding sachet tumbles out of your bodice and onto the floor. A sudden gust from the window sends it tumbling toward the hearth. Your husband jumps up to rescue it. He trips. The bell jingles loudly. You both burst out laughing again. Outside the door, Great Aunt Mildred mutters, "Strong start." Eventually, the room quiets. The bed groans softly beneath you. You whisper a half joke about whether consummation counts if your mother-in-law blessed the sheets with beetroot juice. He responds with a story about a pig that once chased him into a laundry tub. You both fall silent. It's not what you imagined, but it's not awful either. And then you hear footsteps. The priest knocks. Once, twice. The door creaks open an inch. "Everything proceeding?" he asks gently. You throw a pillow. "Go away." He does, quietly, mercifully. You lie back again, eyes fixed on the rafters above, where a spider is spinning something ambitious. You wonder if she's a wedding guest too. You're not sure when you fell asleep. It might have been somewhere between your husband's third attempt at a romantic metaphor and the second time the quilt tried to crawl off the bed on its own. But now it's morning, or at least the roosters think so. Sunlight filters in through a cracked wooden shutter, catching on floating bits of dust and the dried herbs still pinned above the bed frame. You stir, stretch, and immediately regret it. The bed frame groans like a shipwreck, and a spoon falls from the rafters onto your stomach. A mystery for later. Outside, you hear the familiar shuffle of many, many relatives, pretending not to be waiting for something very specific. You glance at your husband. Has somehow still asleep, mouth slightly open, hugging a pillow like it's a long-lost goat. Charming. You nudge him. He snorts awake. Together, wordlessly, you look down at the linens. Right, the bedding token. Now, depending on region, religion, and how nosy your local clergy is, there may be an expectation to produce some sort of proof. It could be a ribbon, a mark on the sheet, a tiny embroidered token pinned to the pillowcase, anything that implies, yes, we are properly and thoroughly wed now. Today, that token is a red cloth tucked discreetly at the foot of the bed. Your cousin slipped it to you yesterday with a wink. You weren't sure what it was for at the time. Now, you're very sure. Historians still argue whether this tradition was a practical legal tool for inheritance or just another way to humiliate young couples. Some noble households kept the sheets like trophies. Some peasants, more practically, used them to polish furniture the next day. You fold the cloth neatly and hand it to your great-aunt, who's already hovering with a tray of pickled eggs and barley porridge. She eyes the token, then raises an eyebrow. "Well done," she says. "No demons." You smile with exactly two emotions, vague embarrassment and extreme relief. Breakfast is brief but memorable. You eat with your new family, now yours forever, including the cousin who always chews like a goat and the uncle who tells the same story about the haunted turnip every meal. The food is warm, if a little adventurous. Porridge, black bread, cheese that squeaks when you chew it, and something called wedding mash that involves raisins, onions, and, if you're not careful, a tooth. As the bride, you're given the honor of pouring the first round of morning ale. Yes, ale for breakfast. You hand your husband a cup. He toasts to shared blankets and not getting cursed. A good start. You're also gifted a new apron, which your mother-in-law ties around you like she's knighting you into kitchen service. "It's for when you start boiling turnips," she says solemnly, which is basically forever now. Later, a procession gathers to walk you both to the edge of the village, where your new home, possibly a glorified shed, awaits. You are handed a broom. No explanation, just a broom. It's symbolic, apparently. You're supposed to sweep away bad spirits before stepping over the threshold, or maybe just to start cleaning. Medieval Europe wasn't great at metaphors sometimes. You perform the sweep, hear a satisfying swoosh, and step inside your cottage. A tiny one-room space with a sloped roof, one bed, two stools, and more dried herbs than an apothecary with hoarding issues. A small window lets in slanted morning light. Your bell finally falls silent as you sit down, ribbon trailing across your lap. You breathe. This is yours now. Strange, itchy, and oddly smoky, but yours. Your husband joins you, clutching a chunk of cheese and a puzzled smile. Still married? He asks. You nod, technically. He leans in, lifts your hand, and presses the cat whisker ribbon token against your palm. Let's stay married, even if the cheese squeaks. You laugh, quietly. And for the first time in days, it feels like the beginning of something more than just tradition. You haven't been in your new home more than an hour before the door creaks open, and in walks, of course, a priest. Not your usual one, mind you. This is the check-in priest, a role you didn't know existed until this moment. He holds a small satchel, a book, and a look of polite concern, like he's not sure if he's about to bless a union or break up a wrestling match. You offer him some cheese. He declines. Wise. He clears his throat and explains that he's here for the ritual of inspection. You blink slowly. Your husband mutters something about going to check on the goats, even though you do not, in fact, own goats. The ritual is supposedly ancient, though historians still argue whether it was a church mandate, a local tradition, or simply nosy officiants trying to justify their lunch stipends. In theory, the priest checks for signs of a successful union, though what those signs are, no one really agrees on. Sometimes it's blood on a sheet. Sometimes it's a herb tucked under the pillow. Sometimes, apparently, it's just a vibe. He asks if he may see the tokens. You show him the red cloth and your slightly wrinkled wedding ribbon. He nods, scribbles something in a tiny ledger, probably a star or a frowny face. You'll never know. Then he sniffs, not in judgment, just sniffs the air. Rosemary, he says, pleased. You nod. He jots something down again. Always good for warding off bad humors. Apparently, your housekeeping skills are now being evaluated based on your aromatic strategy. He walks a slow loop around the room, glancing at the bed, at the herbs strung from the rafters, at the broom you haven't had time to lean anywhere yet. Then he blesses the room, muttering Latin phrases and flicking a bit of water that lands directly in your tea. He turns to you and smiles, a practiced pastoral smile that says, I know this is awkward for everyone, but we're almost done. Do you feel married? He asks softly. You pause. A reasonable question. One that's difficult to answer when your veil is still tangled in your belt and there's a half-eaten beet under the bed. Yes, you reply, though it comes out more like a question than an answer. Good, he says. Marriage is a holy knot. It doesn't always feel tight right away. He closes his book, blesses you both again. Your husband has now re-entered with a log he found outside, and then departs, humming a vaguely familiar tune. You think it was the cabbage ballad from the feast. You sit down on the stool again. Your husband sits beside you, setting the log between you like it's your first child. The silence that follows is oddly pleasant. For the first time since the chaos began, no one is talking at you, jingling at you, stuffing herbs into your clothing, or asking you to pass a pudding that might bite back. It's quiet, soft. You can hear the distant sounds of the village settling into daily life. Hooves on dirt, someone hammering, laughter from a child who may or may not be naked and chasing a chicken. Your husband looks around the cottage and finally says, do you want the side by the fire or the side by the window? You think for a moment. Which side doesn't smell like turnips? Neither, he says. You shrug. Surprise me. He nods solemnly. Window it is. You'll have the best view of passing goats. A small pause. Then you both chuckle. The sacred inspection is over. The room is yours. The knot, however weird and bell-clad, has been tied. You sit together, shoulder to shoulder, married not just by ritual, but now by proximity, shared awkwardness, and mild rosemary trauma. You'd think the morning after your wedding, you get a rest. Maybe a soft moment of reflection, a late sleep, a warm bowl of porridge in bed. But no, before the sun finishes rising, you're summoned to the village square for the morning presentation. It sounds formal, and it is, but also deeply weird. You're guided, again jingling faintly, back into your ceremonial sash and veil, though mercifully adjusted for visibility this time, and marched hand in hand with your husband through muddy lanes where chickens scatter and dogs bark like they weren't just fed half a roast boar the night before. Waiting in the square are nearly all the same faces from the feast, cheerful, hungover, and entirely too invested in your betting situation. Your great aunt is there, knitting something that might be a trap. The priest is nodding solemnly beside a barrel of what might be wine or possibly just warm beet water. A line of small children is singing a chant that includes the phrase, "Bless the union, toast the bed, may no turnips fall on their head." You don't ask. Today's big moment? The display of betting tokens. That red cloth? You're expected to hang it on a hook outside your door or ceremonially hand it to the priest like it's a freshly baked pie. You opt for the handoff, partly because the wind is picking up and partly because the neighborhood goat has taken an interest in your sash and seems poised to eat your veil. You pass the cloth to the priest. He nods dramatically. "Confirmed," he announces. The union is complete, and the couple may now be blessed with turnip stew, healthy children, and mildew-resistant blankets. The crowd claps. Someone sneezes. A dog steals a bannock from a baby. Historians still argue whether these presentations were genuine legal ceremonies or just social rituals designed to reinforce gender roles and low expectations. Either way, they persisted for centuries. In some regions, they were even more elaborate, featuring poems, dances, and, we're not making this up, a dramatic reenactment of the wedding night performed by puppets. You're relieved your village isn't that creative. As a final gesture, your mother-in-law pins a garland of dried rosemary and thistle above your cottage door. To keep out wandering spirits and chatty neighbors, she says, tapping it twice. Your husband leans close and whispers, "Too late on the neighbors." You smirk. Once the crowd disperses, mostly in the direction of the ale barrel, you return home. The fire's burned low, the cottage smells of slightly scorched oats and old celebration. You peel off your wedding sash and place it gently in a basket beside the bed. Then comes the next surprise, gifts. Medieval peasant-style gifts, mind you. You're not unwrapping silver or fine china. You're unwrapping a turnip carved into the shape of a pig. Thanks, Cousin Berta. A wooden spoon with your initials burned into it, slightly misspelled, and a dried fish for fertility. You're not sure if you're supposed to eat it or hang it over the hearth, so you compromise by hiding it behind a pot. You and your husband sit beside the hearth, turning the spoon over in your hands. "It's a nice spoon," you say. "Looks like it says blood and wifey." He squints. "Close enough." Then you unwrap one last item, a square of rough cloth with a hand-stitched phrase in red thread. It's slightly crooked, the letters uneven, but the message is clear. May your bed be warm, your stew be hot, and your arguments short. It's your favorite gift. You hang it by the bed, and for the first time you both exhale in sync, like a kettle finally removed from the flame. Just when you think the ceremonies are over, someone knocks on the cottage door twice, then a third time with the urgency of someone being chased by bees. You open it to find your father standing there with a sack over his shoulder and a grin that could only mean one thing. The dowry inspection. Right, the transaction part. He steps inside, glances around your modest home like an estate appraiser in a room full of turnips, and sets the sack down with a theatrical grunt. Out spills your official dowry. One go, represented here by a symbolic hoof tied with ribbon. 2 iron spoons, a patch cooking pot, and a woven blanket that smells like elderberries and wet hay. "Congratulations," he says. "You're paid for." Your husband nods solemnly, as though accepting both your hand and the cooking pot as sacred commitments. Your father's not done. He pulls out a parchment that details, in shaky handwriting and suspicious ink, the list of items promised in the marriage agreement. This list includes the aforementioned goat, a small plot of turnip-growing land, 1 feather pillow lightly used, 3 bundles of dried herbs, unspecified, and 1 enthusiastic broom. Historians still argue whether these dowries were more about transferring property or reducing family obligations. In most cases, both. A daughter was a liability until married, then she became someone else's. Logistical problem with goat perks. You sign the paper, your husband signs, your father marks it with what might be a thumbprint or a smear of jam. The document is then placed into a ceramic jar and buried near the hearth because Apparently, fireproofing legal records was considered optional in your village. As your father leaves, he slaps your husband on the shoulder and says, "She makes good stew. Don't let her add too much dill." You call out, "That was one time." Alone again, you examine the dowry loot. The pot has a dent that looks like someone once tried to cook a rock in it. The blanket is surprisingly soft, your mother's handiwork, clearly, and the iron spoons are engraved with what might be runes or just accidental scratch marks. You place the goat hoof symbol in a corner, surrounded by dried lavender, in what your husband now calls the shrine of domestic finance. There's no denying it now. The transaction is done. You are not only a wife, but a householder, responsible for the kitchen, the fire, the small plot of turnips, and the broom, which continues to fall over with alarming frequency. You step outside to see your plot of land in paces by 6, lumpy, but yours. You and your husband spend the afternoon hauling water, sweeping the floor, and figuring out how to hang your new blanket without offending any spirits. He climbs a stool to tie it above the bed, slips, and lands in the stew pot. You both laugh until your stomachs hurt. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and as the sun dips low, casting long golden beams across your doorway, your cottage no longer feels like a borrowed space. It feels just slightly like home. You sit down with your new husband, the symbolic hoof beside you, and raise your iron spoon in a toast. "To goats," you say, "and very enthusiastic brooms," he replies. The clink of spoons is the sweetest sound you've heard all day. You've barely had time to settle into post-dowry life when the door opens again, this time not with a knock, but a purposeful creak. In walks your mother-in-law, arms full of bundles, herbs, and what you think might be an entire smoked trout. She smiles a tight-lipped smile. "Time to learn how to keep the house free of spirits and unsuitable odors," she announces, like she's about to teach a military drill. You glance at your husband, who suddenly finds the idea of chopping firewood extremely urgent and disappears before you can protest. Thus begins your crash course in medieval domestic magique, or, as she calls it, womanly preparedness. It includes a tour of the cottage's protective corners, each marked with a dried flower, a smudge of ash, or a piece of garlic taped to a beam with what looks like wax and willpower. The lesson starts with herbs, always the herbs. She lays out bundles of dried fennel, sage, marjoram, and something that smells like a wet sock, but is apparently very effective against spirits and cousins with bad intentions. She teaches you how to hang these herbs above the doorway, always in odd numbers. "Even numbers are for funerals," she whispers, "and for accountants. We don't trust them." Then the bell ritual. Yes, the same bell you wore around your waist yesterday is now being restrung on a cord and tied above the window. "If it jingles at night," she says, "something's either in the house or thinking about it." You decide not to ask what it is. Safer that way. Historians still argue whether these bell and herb rituals were sincere spiritual defenses or just domestic habits that stuck over generations. But for women like you, they're the equivalent of locking the door, setting an alarm, and praying the neighbor's goat doesn't climb onto the roof again. She also teaches you how to make protective burning blends, small piles of herbs, bark, and dried fruit peels to toss into the fire during storms or bad dreams. The smoke is supposed to ward off nightmares, angry ancestors, and indigestion. Or, as she calls it, the unholy trinity. Then comes the lesson on airing the bed. Apparently, demons hate fresh air and crumpled linens. Each morning, you're to fold the blanket back 3 times, scatter a pinch of sage dust underneath, and shake the pillow 3 times out the window while muttering, "Let no shadows linger." It's a bit like cleaning your room while casting minor exorcisms. She inspects your herb pouch from the wedding day and replaces the wilted rue with fresh thyme. "Don't want to smell like last week's regrets," she mutters. Later, she pulls a bundle from her apron and hands it to you. It's a small, cloth-wrapped object tied with red string. "This," she says, "is for the armpits." You blink. "The armpits? Spirits like to hide there," she says flatly, "especially around new brides." You don't ask any follow-up questions. You just nod and tuck it under your arm like someone who values peace over clarity. She finally sits, satisfied, and announces, "You'll be fine. Just remember, lavender is for calm, mugwort is for visions, and never mix mint with regret. That's how your cousin married a woodcutter with 2 extra toes. You thank her sincerely. Because even though half of this makes no sense and some of it may be based on goat folklore, there's something deeply comforting in the rhythm of her words, her presence, her rituals. This is woman to woman wisdom, passed down through onion scented breath and too tight aprons, through trials, stew, and shared silence. As she leaves, she places one last charm above the hearth, a dried apple slice with a single clove pressed in. For sweetness, she says. And then she's gone. You look around your cottage. Every corner now smells like a different kind of protection. Your windows jingle. Your bedding is spiritually deodorized. Your armpits are occupied, and somehow you feel safer than you did yesterday. You wake the next morning to a muffled banging on your door. Not the festive come eat more pudding kind of bang, more like urgent family announcement. You open it to find your younger sister-in-law standing there with a wooden bowl and a face that says, "This is going to be weird. It's time for your birth charm fitting," she says, as if that's a normal sentence. Before you can protest, she's ushered you out into the brisk morning air and down the lane toward the midwife's huda squat, smoky little building with a thatched roof, a leaning herb rack, and a crow that seems very invested in your reproductive future. Inside, the midwife greets you without looking up. She's busy stirring something thick and bubbling in a cauldron, muttering to herself about foxglove ratios and stubborn wombs. She gestures toward a stool without turning around. "You'll need this," she says, handing you a long, narrow strip of cloth covered in faded ink and what might be ancient jam stains. It's the birthing girdle. You run your fingers over the text lines of prayers, charms, and protective symbols meant to guard you during childbirth someday. You are to wear it occasionally, keep it near your bed, and never under any circumstances let it touch pig's blood, vinegar, or gossip. Historians still argue whether these girdles were taken seriously as medical tools or used purely for comfort. Some were blessed by clergy, others by midwives, and a few by that one mysterious relative who knows things about owls. You are also handed a tiny carved bone about the size of a thimble with a hole through the center. "For stringing onto your pillow charm," says the midwife. "It keeps the baby clever." You nod. Clever's good. Next, she produces a paste that looks like mashed beets and despair. "Rub this on your feet every new moon. Keeps you fertile and spiritually symmetrical." You're about to ask what spiritually symmetrical means, but the crow caws loudly from the rafters, and you decide now is not the time. She fits you with a small sachet of herbs and pins it inside your shift. "This will calm your womb when it's feeling jumpy." You didn't know wombs could be jumpy. Yours has mostly been quiet so far. But you thank her again because apparently womb manners are a big deal. The midwife's assistant enters with a steaming bowl of soup and an enormous smile. "Congratulations on your confirmed bedding," she says. "This soup has lentils for strength, garlic for protection, and one very lucky onion." You sip it. It tastes like well-meaning socks. As you're leaving, the midwife leans in close and whispers, "If you dream of fish 3 times in 1 week, you are expecting." You ask, "Cooked fish or swimming?" She narrows her eyes. "Doesn't matter. If they're singing, it's twins." Outside, your sister-in-law links her arm through yours. "She gave me the same girdle," she says. "I wrapped it around the goat once by accident. Still had a baby." You both laugh all the way home. Back in your cottage, you lay the girdle on the bed like it's a sacred relic, which, in a way, it is. It's a combination of prayer, superstition, and embroidered support system. In a world with no prenatal vitamins and lots of damp corners, these charms are what stand between you and the unknown. You tuck the bone charm beneath your pillow. Light a small sprig of mugwort. Your husband enters, glances at the herb smoke curling from the fire, and raises an eyebrow. "Baby preparation?" he asks. "Spiritual symmetry," you reply. He nods, grabs the broom, and resumes his battle with the cobweb that's taken over the eastern wall. You watch him for a moment. He swats. The cobweb laughs. He swats again. You feel okay. You've been married for less than a week, and already your world is full of symbols, Ribbons, bones, belts, dreams, jingly bells, all meant to protect you from things no one can quite explain. But in a strange way, they do work. Not in the logical modern sense, but in the sense that you're not alone. You're woven into something community, a belief system, a long, fragrant history of whispered advice and wool wrapped prayers. You lie down, girdle nearby, and close your eyes. No fish tonight, just warmth. You don't hear her come in. One moment, you're stirring barley stew and wondering if you can get away with only 2 onions. The next, your mother in law is standing in the doorway, holding what looks like a thistle bush and a length of rope. Time for your wellness inspection, she announces. Your husband drops a spoon and immediately exits, mumbling something about firewood again. Hez going to run out of excuses and wood at this rate. The inspection is what you expect. There are no checklists, no measuring spoons. Instead, it's a ritual that somehow blends homeopathy, neighborhood gossip, and mild spiritual intimidation. It begins with the armpits. Yes, the armpits. She asks you to lift your arms, then leans in and sniffs. Not once, twice. Then taps your elbow with a thistle. Clean, she says, but spiritually undefined. Let's fix that. She pulls out a small pot of thick, waxy paste and smears a bit on her fingers. The scent is overpowering: rosemary, tallow, and possibly fear. She rubs it gently under your left arm while chanting something that might be a blessing or a recipe. You stand still, one arm raised like a confused statue, while she repeats the ritual on the other side. This'll keep the bad airs from nesting, she explains. Last thing you want is a demon in the joint. You nod solemnly. Who wouldn't? Historians still argue whether these intimate body inspections were sincere protective rituals or just excuses to gossip under the guise of hygiene. In your case, it's definitely both. Because after the armpits come the questions. How's your digestion? Any odd dreams involving chickens? Do you feel the presence of dead ants in the pantry? You answer as best you can. Fine, only once. And I think it was just the wind. She seems satisfied. Then she produces a small bronze charm shaped like a hand and pins it directly to your shift, over your heart. Protection from envy, she says, especially from women who wear their aprons too tight. You raise an eyebrow. She leans in. You'll know who they are. They sniff when they hug you. Next, she asks to inspect your herb stores. You point to the shelf, and she walks over, examining your bundles like a market inspector judging cabbages. She rearranges them by purpose. Top shelf, calming, cleansing, conjugal encouragement. Middle shelf, digestive, defensive, dream-friendly. Bottom shelf, emergency only, contains nettle, garlic-soaked ash, and something she won't name. You mention the herb sachet under the bed. She looks horrified. Never under the bed. Spirits nap there. She promptly moves it to the window ledge, tapping it 3 times. You learn more in that hour than you did in all your years in your mother's kitchen. There's knowledge buried in every thistle, in every flick of her finger, in the way she listens to the wind before adjusting the broom's position. As she finishes, she hands you a final gift, a tiny pouch of finely ground herb powder. For arguments, she says. You peer inside. It smells faintly of chamomile and threat. Sprinkle a pinch on your pillow if voices get too loud, she advises. And if he ever storms out, place some in his shoes. It'll bring him home faster. You nod, suddenly wondering how often she's used this trick herself. With the ritual complete, she pats your cheek and heads for the door. Before leaving, she turns. You're doing well. The house feels balanced. Just keep your bread facing east, and don't let the broom rest bristle up. That invites confusion, and then she's gone. You sit down on your stool, freshly anointed, slightly overwhelmed, and filled with the odd comfort of being a very small part of a very strange tradition. You touch the bronze charm on your chest. It's warm now. You take the herb sachet from the window and gently tuck it beneath your pillow just for tonight. And maybe, just maybe, you'll sprinkle a little of that argument dust preemptively. It's been a week since the wedding, and today brings another milestone. Your first full day as a wife in public. Not the ceremonial bride who jingled through a feast. Not the veiled figure holding lavender like a nervous wand. Today, you're expected to show the village you're capable, responsible, fully transformed into someone who knows exactly how long to boil cabbage before it offends the neighbors. You are handed your tools of the trade: a large wooden spoon, a cracked basin, and a small sack of barley with a hole in the corner. You hold them like a soldier with questionable armor. First stop, the bakehouse. It's a smoky, stone-walled building at the edge of the village where women gather like clouds around a stormy oven. The heat is overwhelming. Someone hands you dough. No instructions, just dough. You start kneading, and immediately everyone begins judging your technique in unison. Your loaf is shaped more like a weasel than a braid. A chorus of grunts and helpful mutters follows. Needs more force. Less water. More elbow, less soul. One woman suggests whispering a prayer to the flour. Another insists bread made in silence always tastes better. You don't argue. You focus on not crying into the dough, it's already too salty. Later, the loaves are branded with your initials using a hot iron rod. Yours sizzles. Everyone nods approvingly. The village takes bread seriously. Next, spinning. You're led to a bench near the square where older women sit with distaffs and spindles, their fingers moving with the slow, hypnotic rhythm of generations. You try. Your wool ends up looking like a small, angry cloud. Someone chuckles, shall learn, or shall knit a demon. Either way, exciting. You smile politely. Your hands are covered in fiber, flour, and the faint itch of future expectation. Historians still argue whether these early roles for new wives were tools of empowerment or subtle chains. But in your case, it's not chains, it's yarn. Long tangle yarn that somehow ends up in your stew. At midday, you return to your cottage to make lunch. It's a humble affair. Barley gruel, turnips, and a suspiciously spicy leek you found under the bench. You sprinkle in some herbs from the middle shelf safe ones and say a small thank you to whatever spirit hasn't yet possessed the broom. Your husband arrives, windblown and grinning, carrying a muddy basket of mushrooms. He sets it down like a prize. Don't worry, he says. I only picked the ones that smelled like bread. You eye the basket warily. That's not reassuring. He shrugs. Well, boil them in beer. If they scream, they're fine. Lunch passes peacefully, quiet spoons, shared smiles, only one suspicious mushroom. Later, an elder visits to offer her blessings. She's ancient and moves like folded laundry. She brings a blessing token, a small figure carved from bone, with a smudge of ash on its head and a ribbon around its waist. She places it near the hearth and whispers, "For harmony, and to keep foxes from stealing your eggs." It's a multi-purpose charm. You thank her, and as she hobbles off, you realize something odd. Today didn't go terribly. Your bread is edible. Your stew didn't curse anyone. And your husband is still alive, even after 2 helpings. You sit by the fire, watching the flames curl and flicker like fingers reaching through time. Around you are signs of life: spinning wool, warm bread, muddy footprints, protective charms, and faint jingly echoes from the bell tucked in your apron pocket. Being a wife, it turns out, is less about knowing everything and more about trying everything while the stew doesn't burn. And maybe, just maybe, letting the dough take shape however it likes. The moon is full tonight, throwing pale light across your tiny window and making the thatch above your bed look like silvered feathers. Everything is still except the fire, which hums gently in its cradle, casting soft orange shadows that dance on the cottage walls. You're tucked beneath the patchwork blanket, legs still slightly sore from crouching at the bakehouse, and hands smelling faintly of leeks and lavender. Your husband is beside you, already dozing, one arm curled around a pillow like it owes him money. The bell that once jingled at your waist now hangs silently above the hearth, tied to a hook your mother-in-law approved with a firm nod. Its silence is a kind of blessing. It means no spirits, no mischief, no bump in the night, except for the broom falling over again. You really should lean it on the other wall. You reach under your pillow and touch the little bone charm from the midwife, the one meant to bring clever dreams and maybe ward off owl-related premonitions. It's warm now, shaped by the press of your sleep, and it fits oddly well into the palm of your hand. The cottage smells like the day: wood smoke, fresh bread, and the faint lemony tang of your new floor scrubbing mix, equal parts vinegar, mint, and defiance. You breathe in deeply, exhale slowly. Your mind drifts not to chores, not to rituals, but to moments. Your wedding morning, barefoot in the mud, the veil that made you walk like a confused sheep, the ribbon with a cat whisker, your husband tripping over his own sleeve and yelling, "I'm fine," while falling into the stew pot. You didn't know marriage would be like this. You thought it would be grand or grim or something in between. But mostly it's been strange, funny, a little itchy, and surprisingly soft in places you didn't expect, like his snores when they settle into rhythm, or the way your apron fits better now that your shoulders have relaxed. Outside, the wind begins to rise. Just a breeze, just enough to rattle the herbs strung above the window. You watch them sway mugwort, sage, rosemary, and feel something loosen in your chest. Maybe it's contentment, or maybe it's just the barley soup. Your eyes grow heavy, the flames dim, and somewhere, deep in the folds of your quilt and the creaks of the cottage wood, you feel the shape of something settling, something new, something whole. You're not just the girl with a jingly belt anymore. You're not the one with wilted thyme tucked in your shift, or the bride with a goat-based dowry. You are a wife now. A baker, a weaver, a turnip boiler, a possible mother, a caretaker of brooms, bones, and blessed linen. And most importantly, the proud owner of one very enthusiastic spoon. As the last ember flickers out, your breath slows. You nestle into the warmth, your charm tucked safely in your fist, and the sound of your husband mumbling in his sleep about cabbage. It's not a fairy tale, but it's yours. Let the last of the fire's glow fade from your mind now, and imagine yourself lying on that patchwork bed, the softness of the blanket rising and falling gently with each breath. The herbs above your window sway ever so slightly, like sleepy dancers caught in a lullaby breeze. There's no more noise, no more footsteps, no more inspections. Just quiet. Just the rhythmic creak of the old wood settling around you, embracing you. The bell above the hearth doesn't move. It's resting too. You shift slightly under the weight of the day, and every fold of your blanket holds you more gently than before, almost as if it remembers every moment you've had since the morning you stepped barefoot through the mud and into a new life. Outside, the fields are silver. The goats have stopped muttering. Even the wind has forgotten its way. You don't have to do anything now. You've lit the hearth. You've learned the songs. You've baked the bread and tucked away the ribbon. You've endured the smells, the awkward glances, the armpit inspections, and all the rituals of a world far stranger than it seemed at first glance. And you've laughed through all of it. Now in the quiet, in the warmth, you can let it all go. Let your eyes close. Let your mind quiet. Let the world turn without you, just for a little while. Because tonight, in this story, everything is finally at rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.